The Clare activist Martin Guilfoyle has returned home after a dramatic and contentious mission aboard the Global Sumud Flotilla, which aimed to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. The 75-year-old, who was aboard the vessel that was intercepted by Israeli forces in international waters, has described being confronted at gunpoint, detained and subjected to what he calls intimidation and harsh treatment over several days. Of course, more than 170 activists were on board, with some reportedly requiring medical attention following the interception. And while all Irish participants, including Martin, have now been released, concerns remain about others still in custody. And Martin Guilfoyle is on the line now to recount his experience. And you're very welcome to the show, Martin. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for giving me this opportunity.
We really appreciate you joining us so soon after what must have been an eventful and I'm sure a harrowing ordeal at times. But maybe can we take you back and to prior to the flotilla, and can you talk to us a bit about your decision to join up with it and to participate in it? What motivated you personally?
Well, I've always been interested in trying to do the right thing, and I followed the issues in Palestine for many years, long before October the 7th. And I thought I was past getting involved in things at my age. When I saw the number of children being murdered and the world turning away from it, I thought, well, I've got to do something. I know people will say you're an idiot and the rest of it. But if I can do a small bit, I'll do it. I'm a human being, and the numbers coming out of Gaza, each one of them is a human being. Each is there's children there. I mean, if you think of Raja, that little girl in the car, and they waited, and when the ambulances came to try and rescue her, they murdered them as well as that child.
And indeed, last week on the show we were joined by Martin Roper, who was carrying out a peaceful remembrance of Hind Rajab's life at Shannon Airport over the weekend, and he recounted how she died in absolutely horrific and tragic circumstances. I guess that just shows the strong feeling you had, Martin, that you wanted to join up with the flotilla. But even with that, at your age, were you concerned at all? Because you'd be aware of what's happened in previous flotillas. Were you at all wary, or was there even an element of fear?
There was an element of fear. I'm no flaming hero. I knew there was real dangers there, but whatever I would go through would be nothing compared to what the children of Gaza are going through, and the people as well. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to do something to stop what's happening there. I know it's a tiny drop in the ocean and it mightn't make any difference, but I would appeal to people, please, don't turn away from them. They need us to be aware of them. That's the only motivation I have. I never dreamt I'd be on a radio station talking about it or anything like that. It's a very personal, decision I made, and I take the opportunity here to say I discussed it with my family, and they were fully behind me, and they put up with an awful lot as well. So, and to all the people that supported us, and the people of Clare and Cork that got onto the embassy and things like that, it has got to be done. It's simple as that for me.
Martin, what was your experience of the flotilla like? Obviously, before being intercepted by the Israelis, was it what you imagined it would be? Was there a great sense of solidarity amongst the flotilla and on board your ship, the Romantica?
Well, I went to Barcelona to help with preparation of the boats and that for a fortnight before the flotilla sailed, and my experience on the boat, the first boat I was on, was interesting enough because we had many problems and we ended up with a largest kind of hole in it, and we limped our way to Sicily, and we got there eventually. And but a sense of solidarity, a sense of purpose. There was no egos anywhere. The only thing that was important was Palestine, especially Gaza. That was the only objective there. When we got to Sicily, I got transferred then onto Romantica. Now, that was a boat that had, if I've got this right, there were 3 Argentinians, 1 Peruvian American, two Catalans, and there was Colin Byrne, who was the captain, and there was a medic there. He was of Spanish origin, I think, and we gelled. It was, the boat looks lovely from the outside, and it was a lovely boat, but with extra bunks being put in to keep us all, and the aid being put in as well, there wasn't much room for comfort, if you like. But we got on with it, and they were a great group to sail with, and all dedicated to the one thing: taking humanitarian aid to Gaza, and to try and keep the eyes of the world on Gaza. People seem to have forgotten about it with everything else what's happening. And the Western governments just... We were 700 miles from Israel when we were kidnapped, and there's no other way to describe it.
Because it was in international waters.
It was in international waters. We weren't even near. It's piracy. If any other nation had carried out that kind of thing, they'd be bombed into oblivion.
And Martin, that moment is going to happen, because it's what happens with every other flotilla. The Israelis intercept it, and they do it in international waters. All of you aboard the Romantica, it's going to happen, but can you keep that thought out of your mind? Or the closer you get to Greece, and are you worrying that the moment is going to come, and does that element of fear increase?
Well, to be honest, we didn't expect to be intercepted as early as we were. And the element of fear, again, it's not about heroics or anything, but my sole focus, and that's what I kept to the front of my mind, was that the people of Gaza, the children of Gaza, the suffering of Gaza, that, everything else paled into insignificance in that. I even surprised myself when I was walking up with a gun in my face. And I was calm. Again, I told myself, no. And through all of it, I knew that my ordeal would finish at some time, whether it be 2 days, 3 days, a week, a fortnight, or 3 weeks, that sooner or later my ordeal would stop. But in my mind all the time was, the ordeal for these children and these people in Gaza is not going to stop.
And that's an understandable point, Martin, but at the same time, I suppose you don't know how, whilst your ordeal indeed will be shorter than what those in Gaza have experienced, you don't know how severe your ordeal will be. Can you talk us through the Israelis boarding your vessel? You mentioned having a gun pointed in your face. What happened, and how, I suppose, antagonistic or rough or otherwise were the Israelis?
Well, I was due to go on shift to steer the vessel at 8 o'clock in the evening. So I said to Colin, the captain, this was about 5:30. I said, I'm going to go down and get an hour or two of shut-eye, so before I come on shift. And I just took my boots off and lay on top of my bunk. And the next thing I knew was I could hear a commotion, and I told him, what the hell's going on? And I just started to put my boots on. And the next thing was there was a thunder and jumping down the steps into the cabin. And a gun pointed at me. I mean, within 2 feet of me, I'd say, and a torch in my face and being shouted and dragged. And I was trying to explain I needed my hearing aid and glasses. I tried to buy a little time and to get some bits and pieces together, but we weren't allowed. So I was in a pair of long shorts and a T-shirt and a jumper and my boots. And I had the presence of mind. I had a bag hanging up with some of my medications in and my passport. I managed to grab that as I was getting pulled up the stairs, and there was a jacket lying there, and I grabbed that and a hat. Anything at all, I just grabbed, because I knew what was coming.
Yeah, because you mentioned being calm, and I directly quote you, you mentioned being calm but breaking it, I think, as anyone would be. Can you explain that mixture of emotions, Martin?
Well, it's almost impossible. You know, when I look back on it, it seems crazy. You know, it's so surreal. But I'm just an ordinary human being, but I was so focused on what was happening, and we had gone through some training about keeping calm, being non-confrontational. We weren't aggressive. We were non-violent. There was nothing there that could be construed to be violent, but it didn't stop them. I mean, they're shouting and roaring, you're getting orders from all different angles, there's lights being shone at you, guns pointed at you. I ended up being thrown down on the deck, and I landed on my right hip, which is fairly painful, and you're first of all told sit and then move and sit here and there. And if you even turned your head to look at one of your friends, you know, you'd get a push or a roar or a gun and the torch would be in your face again.
So it's all about... Yeah. It sounds like, Martin, there's no allowances made for your age.
No, there was no allowances made for my age. I didn't expect it. Don't ask me, people say I'm stupid, but so be it. It was a strange situation. We were all there. Then we were transferred onto a high-speed rib. Again, all the threatening and bullying, shouting, pushing, shoving. Then we were transferred from that onto what would appear to me to have been a large landing craft that would have been used for landing tanks and stuff like that. And we were then told to, again, kneel down. The deck was soaking wet. So you were down on all fours, head down, and that was for some time. I have no concept of how long these things took, because we weren't allowed watches or anything of value was taken from people.
And were you given any explanation as to why the boat was intercepted and why you were being transferred there at any stage, or?
No, there was no explanation for anything. You know, at first I thought, you know, it might be a Greek situation, you know, because we were near Greece, we were near Crete, and then I saw then they told us who they were, and you could see the insignia on their uniforms and their guns and all the rest of it. But you were on your knees all the time, and at one stage, I mean, I've had a number of accidents in my life, and I suffered with quite a bit of arthritis. And I kind of went to not even stand up, but just to move my leg a bit and to try and straighten me back. And there was a foot placed on my back and down. That's all, the only thing that said so. And then when you had to move up the line, you were made to do it. You had to do it on your knees. You weren't allowed to stand up and shuffle forward or anything like that. And then you were brought up to a desk, and you know, again, you'd have conflicting instructions go to the desk, move forward, and then you move forward, get back, all that kind of thing. And all the time there's guns and whatever. And it's just all designed to intimidate. And believe you me, it does intimidate. I wasn't standing there like some flaming superhero or anything like that. I was bricking it, and I knew like that. But again, my entire focus was on Gaza, and they don't think they have to explain anything. They took the jacket off me, and they let me keep me and my passport. They took that, but they allowed me to keep me drugs. That was the only concession that was made.
And Martin, how long did your detention last, and what was that moment like when you're all released or left off at Crete? Did you have a feeling of relief, or what was going through your mind?
Well, it was roughly 2 days detention, and could I just say that in that time there was 180 of us, 180 plus of us. There were 3 40-foot containers. They're 40 foot by about 9.5 foot. And we were 60 odd in each one of them at first. Now, there was only room for sitting close to one another. Nobody could lie down. You couldn't stretch out. So some people went out onto the open area, and they had these hard mats that we were allowed to use to sit on. And you couldn't sleep, even with the reduction in the numbers. And my biggest sort of pain, if you like, was that you were getting no sleep. They'd be calling you for whatever reasons to get out, and then you go back in and all. Just total discomfort. There was no allowance for anything. But during the day, the deck was like an oven. The sun beating down. And you had the choice, if you like. Choice is not the right word, I suppose. But you could go and sit in the container, which you were out of the sun, and fair-skinned, so you're out of the sun in a bit of shade. But the stifling heat in there, you couldn't stay in there for long. So you'd be trying to... But again, can I just say here, the sense of togetherness, and that sounds like something out of Walt Disney, but I went out into the open space to try and get a bit of breeze. There was a slight breeze blowing, and a chap there just come to me and he said, "Look, I've made a shelter here." He said, "You go in there for an hour," he said, "and rest." There was them little, I won't say little bits of kindness.
Yeah, really. A moment of solidarity. No, look, all of you were released, but 2 of your colleagues, Tiago Avila, who's Brazilian, and the Spanish national, Saif Abu Keshek, still being detained. I'm sure all of your thoughts are with them.
They are indeed. Saif was not planning on going to Gaza. He was on an observation boat and happened to work, and he was planning to get off at, I'm not sure whether it was Turkey or somewhere, but I seen those 2. They were taken to the interrogation container, let's call it, and people with extending batons going in there. You could hear the bangs, you could hear them being thrown against the walls. And even like the door, there was no doors on these. There was a door on that container, but it was open. But you could see them being thrown, and I mean, thrown like leaving the floor. They weren't on their feet staggering. They were being bloody launched, and that was the treatment for them. Now, anything that happened to me, like being pushed down and given a odd slap here and there, and that was nothing compared to what these lads went through. And there was others as well when they were transferring us. We didn't know what was happening, but when it came to being, it turned out we were being transferred onto the Greek Coast Guard. Anyone that didn't 100% cooperate with them was assaulted. Some lads had broken ribs. Another lad was shot at close range with a plastic bullet in the leg. These are not exaggerations. This is what I saw with my own eyes.
What?
And a young girl there, she's about, I'd say, 4'6", and because this was her third time on a flotilla, they picked her up and bundled her. You know, and anyone then that raised an objection to that, the gun was pointed at you. This was the nature of it. And lads with broken ribs, some big bad eyes, bad facial damage, arms. There was a litany of things done there. But to me, what was happening to me was trivial compared to what I saw happening to others.
And that's an understandable viewpoint. And Martin, just before I let you go, do you expect anything to come of this? Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, has said he'll raise this at a European level, but realistically, do you see that going anywhere? I mean, what do you make of the response from the Irish government and the EU?
Well, let me say this, that up to now, under the Geneva Convention, it's a war crime to prevent humanitarian aid reaching a war zone. When we were intercepted and attacked, the world witnessed once again the violence used to enforce starvation and genocide on the Palestinian people. The complicity of governments in enabling this to happen in full view of the world is beyond belief. And Micheál Martin saying, well, we should do something about this. Why doesn't he do something about it? Why doesn't he go and do something about it? Why don't we pull out of a small thing, the Eurovision Song Contest? Ireland has pulled out.
Yeah, we pulled out of that. But you want to see more happen,
definitely. And I mean, they can make all the excuses with this, that, and the other thing. But I tell you what, there's no excuse for watching children being murdered. No. What about Shannon Airport? Stop the use of Shannon Airport by military people. You know.
And indeed, we heard those calls last week as well. Martin, unfortunately, I do have to leave it there, but I do want to say thank you so much for joining us and recounting your experience, which, as you say, it sounds pretty harrowing, but you were released, and I know you and all the other activist thoughts are with your two colleagues who are still being detained. Thank you very much for joining us this morning to recount your story.
Could I just say one short sentence? Please, people, don't turn away. Watch it and try and do a little thing about it, even if it's just getting onto your TD or taking a stand somewhere. Boycott Israeli goods. Simple little things that don't cost the earth. We can do it. We can stop this if we all stick together. Anyway, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Martin Guilfoyle there, the Clare activist who recounting his experience aboard the Global Sumud Flotilla and being detained and ultimately released by Israel.